We have a tough chairman here. Yeah. Okay, so pretty much everything that we do with clients, both in terms of growing and selling them, is to do with this wheel. Right? It represents the intellectual backdrop for all of our work with clients. And as you've seen already, those of you who've completed the assessment, right, there are about 80 questions we ask underneath these 8 levers. And for us, beyond the assessment, every one of those questions leads into thousands of PowerPoints of material, right, and tools and techniques and templates and what have you that we put into companies to help them fix problems in those areas, right? So this is our intellectual property, if you like, that we use with firms. It's based on my old firm, so it was put together after 1995 when we put a plan together in my old firm, WTI Group, to build value. We used exactly the same ideas. It didn't look quite as pretty as this wheel, didn't have as many colours back then, right? But essentially it's the same ideas. And that took that business from around about $6 million in sales up to, as it says here, $60 million with 75 million equity value. It was actually about 100, that was the pure consulting bit. We bought a company along the way, an IT services company, that had some hardware sales, and I'd extracted that out of the mix because you like me, probably never aspired to be a PC salesman, right? So we had some of that in the mix, and we eventually sold that off to a management buyer. But it was about $60 million of pure consulting revenues and 75 million equity value. So let's have a look at each of these levers. Oh, sorry, let's have a look at each of these levers. Have I got that right now? Yeah, good. The first one, market proposition. And I think it's fair to say that we've delivered more value in our clients by working on this one lever than any of the other 7. It's really important. This is the bit that says, are we selling what the client wants to buy? It's a quite simple question, isn't it? But it's amazing how many companies don't ask that question first. They're trying to sell stuff that clients don't want to buy, or they don't understand, or they can't buy, or you're making it too difficult for them to buy. If you get this bit right, the rest is a doddle, right? So this is a really important one to get right. And we talk a lot about unique value propositions. You'll all have heard of USPs, unique sales propositions. We put the word value in the middle there to make the point that as consulting firms, we should be selling value. And you can't sell value unless you make the relationship between the fees that you're charging and the financial benefits that a client's going to get. So don't leave that to chance. I don't know how many proposals I've ever written or read, but 95% of the ones I've ever read, I always skip through to the back page, right? Forget what you're going to do, right? Get to the back page, because that's when it says, and it will cost you, Mr. Client, right, this amount of money. Yeah.
Well, in consulting, aren't you selling a lot of cases just ethereal type thing? So you're selling almost hot air. So how do you put the dollar value on the hot air?
Well, I would argue that people won't buy hot air. They will only buy their assumption of what hot air will deliver for them, which is going to be some financial benefit. So it's fine if you want to leave the client to make that link, but I would suggest that's quite risky. So I think you need to make the link between hot air and financial value. And I can say, hand on heart, no matter what the consulting firm's doing, we've never failed yet to make that link. Right? So I don't care whether it's some touchy-feely, HRE type thing that someone's doing, right, or it's a hard cost reduction exercise, right, you can still make that link. So focus your offer on financial benefits. This is really important. And it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer, particularly for the hot air merchants, right? If you can suddenly start saying, in your competitive community, not only do we got good hot air, but we make financial benefits, right? So at the beginning of this year, we sold a company called Blue Sky Consulting. Now that sounds quite hot airish, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a great name, right? Blue Sky Consulting. We sold them to Capita in the UK, one of the biggest public sector outsourcing businesses in the UK. They do a lot of government work, right, in the outsource world. They're a training company, right? But they in the last 5 years, with our help, have been providing significant financial benefits in sales and service through training, right? And they measure right, the result of their activities, and they often get paid on it as well. They're a soft skills improvement company that gets paid on financial results. There are not that many of those around. Yeah? But they were prepared to put their money where their mouth is, and they got a fantastic value when it came to sell to Capita. So this is crucial, this focusing on financial benefits. If you can do this as well, right, make sure that when you're in a client, you're actually in both parts of their P&L. So you're not just this 200k cost, you're the 1 million benefit that's in the P&L as well if you're a client. So if they want to cut the 200k, they've got to cut the million as well, and that's much more difficult for them to do if they've committed that up through the ranks. Make sure if you can that your offer includes a return on investment. And if you can, sharing the results in somehow. I've got clients that share 100% of put 100% of their fees at risk. Our highest EBIT clients put all their fees at risk. Now that's risky for most people. Yeah? These guys are cost reduction or purchasing improvement clients. But for many of you, you could link into the delivery of milestones, all right, or when things were done, and maybe put 20% at risk. Just the sheer fact that you are offering to put stuff at risk will tip the competition in your favour, all right, against those who refuse to do that. You know, the big guys typically won't do that, right? So if you find yourself up against the big four et al., then you will stack the cards in your favour if you're prepared to take some risk. And then finally on this one, promoting your expertise is key. You don't want to be the only people that know about you. Yeah? And God, the number of times I find that, you know, where marketing just doesn't exist as a function in companies.
I would like to hear from the group what percentage of sales are allocated to pure marketing.
Yeah. That's a good question.
I don't know if anyone's been doing it, but it's something we wrestle with.
Yeah.
You know, versus hiring another sales professional or spending $100 grand on a marketing campaign. You know, is anyone doing marketing in the traditional sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And are you getting a return on it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we spend about 8% of revenue on marketing.
How
much? 8.
Yeah.
And it's newsletters that try to establish us as experts, webinars.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sort of thing.
It's crucial. We'll come back to that in a minute,
Okay.
but it's a really important point. Sales and profit growth. You could argue of the 8 levers, this is an output, and the other 7 are inputs. So if you get the other 7 right, then this should go in the right direction. But we're just trying to give you a feel for what good looks like here. So we're usually aiming for getting to gross margins of greater than 50%. So what good looks like to us in the P&L at the gross margin level, the difference between fees and direct expenses, right, should be 50%. So you should effectively be marking up. The easiest way of thinking about this, if you contract some of your work, if you pay $100 an hour to somebody, you should be charging at least $200 an hour to the client. Yeah? There should be at least that 100% markup, which will deliver the 50% gross margin. Yeah? And it needs to be 50% to be able to spend the 20 to 30% on growth and infrastructure and management and intellectual property, etc., and still produce 20% net. And we found that 20% EBIT is the optimum level of profit performance to be at. If it's much more than that, a buyer tends to discount it because they don't believe it's sustainable. So you don't get your bang for the buck, right, in terms of valuation of it. If it's less than that, it's just not optimum, right, in terms of, you know, because ultimately, it'll depend upon your absolute level of EBIT, right, times a multiple, right, as to where you end up. So 20% is a really good figure to aim at. We've got lots of 2020 programs running in our clients. 20% EBIT, 20% growth per annum. Right? And that's a good place to be once you get above a certain size. Obviously, if you start off with 2020, you'll never get there. Right? There's going to be a few 100% to start off with, right? But 2020, once you get to a certain size, is a good place to be. Managing cash so that growth isn't constrained. You'd be surprised just how much store a buyer puts on your ability to manage cash. So looking at debtor days, for example, is a good measure of the robustness of a business. Do you manage, do you put good contracts in place? Do you manage them appropriately? Do you manage your people? Do you collect cash, right? You've got good financial processes. It all comes through into debtor days, right? So if that's more than 30 to 45 days, right, that's bad news, right? And yet I know some of you will work with clients that are on 90-day terms, right? You may not be able to do something about that. But, you know, if it's 90-day terms, you collected 90 or 100, right, rather than 200. And predictability, really crucial here. So this idea that we want this consistent growth in revenue and profits. It's obvious that nothing happens without clients, yeah? So you have to have good clients. Building long-term client relationships always build value. So, you know, if you think that working with clients is about selling them a job, doing it and getting out onto the next client, you're missing a trick. Because when it comes to demonstrating your forecast going